So yeah, I didn't know if you wanted to discuss anything in particular because I sent you like a breakdown. Maybe we could talk about some some topics that I've heard you discuss recently, such as like threats with maybe ultra long term like Neuralink and Google with the AI and stuff like that. And we could talk about profitability expectations. You just did a video on stock based compensation. And then, of course, I think mainly I want to talk about what we're both expecting for the double click event, which is coming up, and maybe what our expectations are there. So, did you want to start with anything else, or does that sound good?
No, I actually I saw the email you sent, and that all that sounds good. We I think we should start with the double click since that's like the most recent thing coming up.
Yeah.
I'm really curious to what you have in mind with double click. What's going to happen? I don't have too many thoughts on that, so I really hope to pick your brain on that.
Yeah, so obviously we had Demo Day, which was in January, which was kind of the introduction to opening up what Palantir's platforms are and what they just showing the general public what they how they function and what they look like from the inside out. And what I noticed is that was before their Q1 earnings report, and this one is also they're calling it a series, so I expect them to continue to do this going forward. But this one is actually before their Q2, or not. Obviously, last what I was saying was in Q1 when they're doing the Q4 earnings release from 2020. But anyway, I'm thinking this could be something they do maybe perhaps before every time they do a quarterly release, because they do show the little icons Q1, Q2, Q3, and Q4 on the webpage for the double click event. So this could be a quarterly thing that they get going with. Obviously, the quarterly releases, it's about the financials, it's about how did the business do, but I think it is important to keep investors up to date on what the software platforms themselves are capable of, what industries they're looking into, and maybe any partnerships they can highlight and kind of explain from there. So this one I'm pretty excited about. They've talked about it's going to be featuring kind of two industries out of the 40 that they are in currently, and I think it's life sciences and industrials, it says right here on the website. So I think it'll be definitely interesting to see what they have to say on that. And I'm expecting it to be pretty technical, just as the last one was. But my thoughts from the original demo day was that it was kind of like, obviously I think they did a great job putting it together, but I think they could have done a better job getting or being a little more engaging on getting the speakers to be a little more engaging. They did a great job with the graphics and everything, but I think maybe I don't know. That's just how I felt. I think it was a very well put together presentation, but I mean, they do have a lot of good marketing material for this one coming up. So I don't know if I'm sure they're like refining their craft with these kinds of things. But yeah, how did you think about the first one?
Yeah, I agree with you on the first one. I liked it. I feel like we're not like the target audience, so a lot of the information kind of goes over our heads. And from the speaking perspective, I definitely agree with you there. That's what kind of like disconnected me from the demo day presentation. That the speakers are pretty much they're engineers reading from something that they drafted, and the fact that they're just kind of like reading from it, you just kind of feel disconnected from them. But if we're not the target audience, and the target audience is these industries that are looking to implement this kind of technology that can help them have like some kind of competitive edge. I'm sure they understand the lingo, and as you said, the videos and the presentation itself was, I believe, effective. So if that audience kind of like it resonates with them and they adopt that. Just kind of going back to the point that you made, I'm curious what you think the advantage is of having the demo day prior to every quarter. What do you think the advantage is to that? Because I think you are right. So we had a demo day right before Q4. We're having another one right before Q1, and they did announce that they're going to have multiple demo days. So what do you think the advantage is? Like, what's the strategy there behind that, having it right before quarterly report?
Yeah, so I'm not sure if it's much of a strategy, more as like just lining up with the, like as I said, the financial release is what every company that is publicly listed has to deal with. But I think maybe Palantir will, as I said, or as we know, this is going to be a series. So I don't think they're going to be putting these out like every week or so. But I think maybe like every few months they continue this series, and perhaps it does correspond with happening before the financial releases or the quarterly financial releases. So I don't know if doing it before the Q1 release is any sort of strategy, more as that's just when it could happen. But if we look at how the stock performed last time, I don't think this is the kind of company that would want to just maximize the stock performance in any short term way. But the stock did have a very strongly positive reaction ahead and following the event. So I don't know if they're going after that, but perhaps, I mean, maybe that's what they're thinking about. But I do think that being able to cater to the whoever their partners are, in this case the industrial side of things and the maybe the life sciences as well, and just kind of ticking through each one maybe every quarter, getting eventually maybe into all 40 that they say they're going after, maybe two or three or four every quarter. I think, yeah, just catering to their potential clients and organizations, as you said, is definitely going to be something they want to do, and they're building their sales force. They're obviously trying to expand as much as they can. And I do agree with you when you say that it's not for us retail investors. It's probably more for probably the institutional investors to see a little bit too. But yeah, obviously for the companies and the businesses that are going to be onboarding Palantir software and using it in their day-to-day operations. So yeah, that's just kind of what I'm thinking. I'm not sure there's any particular strategy having it before or after the earnings report, but we know this is going to be a series, and yeah, I think perhaps they will do it before, generally around that same time as the earnings reports.
Yeah, I've seen this as like a sales and marketing strategy for them. The demo day, just to kind of be able to showcase the technology that they have and the advantage that these companies can have if they adopt their technology. So from that perspective, I think that those demo days are effective in that sense. I don't think, obviously, like retail investors are not target audience. I even doubt that the institutional investors are the target audience for this. It just seems like a huge sales and marketing event, just kind of the same way that like Tesla has those when they unveil their new vehicles and they allow people to kind of buy them beforehand or so just in that way, I think that's what that is. It's like, hey, are you in life sciences? Here's something that can help your industry. This is something that can give you a competitive edge. So that's sort of how I see it. But yeah, I think that the marketing for this one this time around is a lot better. I just saw their video that they posted, that 1 minute clip on the double click presentation or kind of preview to it, and it just looks really good. So I definitely do think that they're probably even going to get better every time that they do these events. I think they're going to continue to improve on what they just did the last time around. So I do hope that like they probably are. It would be better if they're not just kind of somewhere in a basement reading off a computer screen, because that's how I felt the last time around. It's like just a white wall behind them and they're just reading off a computer screen. Hopefully it's a little bit more engaging. So we'll see.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. We got like Sankar in his bedroom, even on the Yahoo Finance interviews. It was like, come on, can we not get this guy in the office? But like obviously we need to understand a pandemic and everything. But yeah, I've been very impressed with their marketing material. As you said, they have multiple video teasers out for this one already. The website looks great. They've got even some like full PDF overviews already. The press releases are good to go. Yeah, and I think they definitely have a specific focus this time. I know they said on the Q4 call that they wanted to do this series, and they weren't necessarily initially planning to do it, but they did want to get this one out there because there really is just so much about Foundry in particular. Just it's just such an open-ended platform that they had a tough time with maybe just outreach on the initial demo day presentation, because it's just so hard to contextualize what the software can do when you're going for like an overview, and that's why they're breaking it down into these specific industries and what they want to share within those.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's key right there. That Foundry presentation and demo day, because I think it was only about 30 minutes, right? So it was like 30 minutes of Foundry, 15 minutes of Gotham, and about 15 minutes of Apollos. So yeah, it was just an overview, and yeah, so I think that as they get more specific towards like this, like the specific industries and what they're doing for these industries, whether it's, you know, focusing on supply line or focusing on tracking COVID or whatever it is, I think that we'll be able to see with more detail exactly what they can do, and I think that would prove to be very effective for them. So you have like Neuralink, and you have Google and AI, and I know you referenced the video that you watched where I speak about Neuralink. I just couldn't recall where I did that. Unfortunately, I put out too many videos, so kind of hard to keep track.
Yeah, totally. I think it was one of your live streams or longer talks. I think it was with the one with it was just like a channel subscriber you had on. His name escapes me, but you were talking Gary, about, yeah. What was his name?
His name's Gary.
Gary.
He's like, yeah, he served in the military, and he actually does IT work there. So it was interesting. He wanted to get on the channel and just kind of talk about like his experience, or like his interaction with people that work on Palantir and so on, and why he was so like bullish on the company, because he sees like the growth within the military and so on.
Yeah, that was a great talk. Yeah, so I heard you bring up Neuralink as a potential future threat to what Palantir is working on, and I don't know if he was too familiar with what Neuralink is doing, but I thought that was a very interesting point, because obviously we have what Elon Musk calls whatever you transfer the information from your phone to your brain, and there's the disconnect there from your computer.
Yeah, the output input lag between output and input.
The lag time or whatever. But Neuralink is going to completely replace that potentially, and just bypass the lag time and just go straight to your brain. And once you have a chip in your brain, or however they're going to do it. Did you see the video they put out? It was very impressive. Was it yesterday or 2 days ago with the monkey?
It's crazy, man. It gave me like some Planet of the Apes vibes.
For real. Anyway, I think Neuralink, that's a good point as to a hypothetical threat to Palantir, because once you have the chip in the brain and there's the symbiosis between AI and just humanity, I think that's probably going to deal with a lot of problem solving that maybe Palantir is going after with what they were, or with what they are for their platform. So I was just wondering if you could maybe overview your thoughts on that, or if I was jumping the gun on what you don't think that's potentially a threat. But I thought it was a very good connection, regardless of between two different approaches to artificial intelligence.
Yeah, I don't necessarily. So when I first started covering Palantir, I said that I see Palantir eventually scaling to consumers, and I get a lot of questions like, what kind of product can they offer consumers? And my response to that was always like something like Neuralink, whether it be wearable or something that's implanted, but something like Neuralink, because that's their entire vision, right? Like, how do we merge humans with artificial intelligence to augment human intelligence? Because that's kind of the idea. Like, how do we partner humans and artificial intelligence? They don't believe that artificial intelligence alone can be successful, not in the short term, as a lot of people seem to believe, where artificial intelligence is going to completely replace a human being and be 100 times better than anything that we can do in the near future, and that they're kind of like working on the assumption that that's not going to happen in the near term. So the best thing to do is to merge the two. There was a video that you posted actually of Stephen Cohen, who's one of the founders, and he kind of talks about this. I think he talked about like this chess player, like they use like the best AI on chess versus like the best human, and the best AI beat the best human, but then they merge like AI with a human, and they were able to win like the tournament, something like that. I forget the exact details, but it was something like that. So that's where like that idea of merging artificial intelligence and humans comes from. So to me, like the logical step for Palantir is when they do get to, if they do get to a consumer product, that would be some kind of consumer product that would merge with humans to augment their intelligence. That's their whole vision, right? Augmenting human intelligence. So if they do get to that point, then I see Neuralink as being the threat, because that's basically what Neuralink is. Like the founding of Neuralink isn't like, you know, to help with paralysis and things like that, which is something that it can do. But the reason why Elon Musk decided to work on Neuralink is because he sees artificial intelligence as an existential threat to humanity. So he has this whole thing of like, well, if you can't beat them, join them. The best thing that we can do is merge humans with artificial intelligence to give them some kind of competitive edge. And so that's kind of like where that comes from, because I've been asked a lot lately, like, who do you think are Palantir's competitors, or what's the downside to Palantir? Well, the number one thing is like, if they're wrong about this AI, their entire business model is being built on that assumption that AI cannot really be functional on its own. Therefore, the best way to move forward in business is to couple AI with humans. If they're wrong about that assumption, like say Google ends up developing an artificial intelligence like a AGI that actually does the job better than a human, then there goes their entire business model, right? And but if they are right, so who in the industry is working in something like this? Well, the only company that I can see that is working in something similar to this, and I think they're kind of ahead in the game, is Neuralink, because they're already working to like provide you with a consumer product, right? Like this is something that every individual can merge with AI. It's not for businesses or anything like that. And then like the potential for that is like, it's really extreme, because like, I don't know about you, but like when I'm making videos, I like doing like live streams or just kind of connecting with my audience through a live stream, because for that same reason, like the output input, that feedback loop, right? Where like if I do a live stream, the information that I have just flows out of me into my audience, and there's no output or lag in between. And so, but when I'm like creating a video, like I'm working on this future projections for Palantir, and I'm writing a script and I'm editing that script and all of that, like the output, I'm even frustrated like typing, you know, because it's like, how do I just get my thoughts out there and not have to like type them down? And I feel like the output is like really slow. So the potential, like removing that lag in between that, just the potential like for that is huge, you know, like to be able to like reply to someone with a thought and things like that. It's pretty huge. So it's very ambitious. It's a little bit scary. I don't know if it will be successful. I don't know that it will be successful, but if it is, like that potential is like huge. Like it just will really eliminate a lot of things. Like it'll eliminate our phones. It'll eliminate the way we type, you know, when you can just think an email and things like that, you know, like it'll eliminate a lot of things. So anyway, so for me, Neuralink is already working towards what Palantir could potentially be if they go. And now I'm making a big assumption I'm making the assumption that Palantir does want to create products for consumers. That's an assumption I'm making because that's something that they've never talked about. But if they do, that to me, that's like the most logical conclusion, that they will create something that merges with humans, and that merges humans and AI, because that's their whole business model. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, so actually what I just thought about was I think Neuralink is more going after the interface right now for how are they going to commercialize this? How is this going to become a reality? They've got the scientists, they've got the robots, at least they showed some of that a few years ago in their presentations, how they would actually get the chip inside the brain. It's like micro insertions or whatever. Obviously, that's not anything that we know of that Palantir's working on for how to get chips in people's brain. But I think they talk about the Neuralink being like a computer chip in the brain, and you need another layer on top of that, which is the actual software, the firmware, or whatever. That I think there's what they've showed is something that will interact with the phone through the Neuralink. So I think there is potentially a way that the Neuralink can exist and be widely adopted, and Palantir kind of sits on top of that for whatever software that they bring to a wider market, which kind of brings me into the another discussion topic, which is, and I saw you talk about this a little bit. I saw it on Palantir's blog. It's the phishing or phishing or however you say it. The password. I didn't really look too much into it, but it's like the Chrome extension that Palantir released. It's what I think is the first time they've brought something out that's like a consumer product. And I don't think it's directly from them. I think it's from like Spectre Ops. It's put out by Spectre Ops, so it's not even like from Palantir on the Chrome web store. But I think it is a initial indication of what a Palantir product could look like. And as you had brought up in your video, like password protection, Palantir's really into security and all of that. They've got the government clearance levels. They know how to keep things encrypted. So it's an interesting first step, but I think we could maybe get into a discussion on what consumer products Palantir could get into in future years. I don't think it would be anytime soon. I think right now we've got government work and really expanding that, because the government expansion is not done. And Gotham, I think they're continually focused on pushing that forward, pushing the envelope on the AI, Ava. I think we saw that video recently that got released. That's very impressive from what I've seen of it. And then obviously Foundry. I think the next 5 years is really going to be pushing the two platforms, Gotham and Foundry. We'll see how far Foundry can get, and maybe I'd hope pushing mainstream, downstream to medium to smaller size businesses. We'll see how that develops or unfolds, if that's with new features, if it's with a potentially lighter platform. I put out a concept video on that, what that could look like, maybe just a completely reimagining and lightening the experience for a smaller business. But anyway, I think they're going to have their hands full with scaling and iterating on Foundry and Gotham over the next 5 years. But I think potentially by the few years before the end of the decade, I think they could, as you're saying, get down to a consumer product once they've capitalized off of the government and the enterprise work. And I think once they're a big enough company, they've got enough engineers, and they've been through everything, they'll be like 25, 3, I don't know, so pretty old company by then, or old considering where they started, that they will have had enough experience, and they'll still have ambition to expand into a consumer product. So I think whether that's them developing their own implant device, I'm not sure if that's what they're interested in. I think Neuralink's kind of going to have the stranglehold on the market for implanting. Elon Musk is an innovative person magnet, so I'm sure he's taken the best of the best when it comes to the scientists and the people involved with getting that into people's brains and working on the robots and interfacing with the brain, understanding the brain, and what engineering is involved with that. And I know they're working on every marketing thing that Neuralink puts out. They're like, come join our team. That's what they're really focused on. So I think Palantir would be behind at that point. Maybe they could be another player, but I think they're definitely going to be, they're definitely a software company. So they, I think, would want to be a layer on top of the Neuralink. Or I don't think we're going to be completely done with phones and personal computers by the end of the decade. So I think there will be a lot of room to expand to consumer products, just regular platforms, the App Store, web based, Chrome. Well, we saw the Chrome extension. That's their first part. So I was just wondering, do you think that, well, yeah, like, do you agree with my take on maybe Palantir could interface with the Neuralink if that is really going to become a reality in the future? Or do you think they would have to develop their own solution? And then maybe we could talk about what consumer products they could be getting into.
Yeah, so a couple good points there. So when it comes to them integrating with Neuralink, again, like working off an assumption here, like it's speculation that Palantir is even interested in, because the government sector, the commercial sector, it's huge, right? So in order to like monopolize that sector, it's going to take time. Like it's not like they're going to like move on from that sector. So any like potential product that they can offer will really strain the resources, whether it be manpower, engineers, and so on. So they are a very like, I think they think through what they want to release and how long they're going to execute in those areas before they move on to like the next product. Or because like we've seen it with Gotham, right? Like they started in 2003, like that's when the idea came to mind. They didn't start working with like the government effectively until like 2008, and they didn't really develop a commercial business platform till like 2016 or so. So that's a good, from 2003 to 2016, that's over a decade where they're just focused on the government sector. And the commercial business has been going on for about four years now, I guess. And so I just see them working in this area for a few more years. So with that said, all these other partnerships that they're making, like with IBM and AWS, it looks like they are kind of going into like medium-sized businesses a lot sooner than what I expected. Originally, I expected them to do that sometime in 2005 or something like that. But I think we're going to start seeing more products for medium-sized businesses specifically. And then Alex Karp did mention that, like he acknowledged that medium-sized businesses would be good for Palantir. And as a CEO, I don't think he would acknowledge something like that if they didn't already have products in mind, especially because the way that they execute, like they're not trying to like give the impression that their TAM is bigger than what it is, right? Like they're very focused on their TAM, which is like 63 billion for the government sector, 56 billion for the commercial sector, and this is our sandbox that we're playing in. Even though I'm sure they're well aware that it's much more than that. I'm sure they're well aware that they can grow much more, and they plan to as well. But anyway, so the fact that he said that, I do think that we are going to start seeing products for the commercial sector a lot sooner. Now, to just really quickly answer that question with the interface, I don't know if like Neuralink, Elon Musk would trust like the software portion of what he's trying to accomplish with Neuralink to another company. I think Elon Musk holds that portion of the business really close to the chest, So I don't know that he would. I think like interface or anything like that, that's something that Elon Musk would take on for the company, because that's really where like the potential growth is for the company and where the company's going to go in the future lies. It's not so much the hardware; it's more like the software. I don't know.
Huh. Yeah. That's an interesting question, but maybe just kind of thinking back to Steve Jobs and the iPhone, I know that he initially did not want an app store on the iPhone, and what that meant was Apple was going to have to develop all of their own applications, and that puts a lot of strain on the the development team, but also it really limits the use of the device. So yeah, I don't know if, and Elon always talks about there are only so many good engineers, and it's not really, Tesla isn't limited by capital right now. They have $20 billion. That's not a problem, but they have $20 billion. Why can't they put up 10 factories overnight? It's because these things take time. Engineers are good engineers, the ones that would actually be able to do something as advanced as what Neuralink is doing is they're very hard to come by. So I don't know if, yeah, it's an interesting question because I think there really would have to be third party applications or whatever you want to call implementations on Neuralink's platform. I understand your point about it being completely different from like iOS or Android because it's in your brain, but they could definitely be some really advanced precautions in place for that to make sure that nothing goes wrong, or maybe it's too hard. But I think it for what Neuralink is going after, just think about all the ways that we interface with our devices today. It's web, it's specific applications. I don't think Neuralink themselves would be able to code all of that. And maybe I'm missing something, but I think there would need to be some third party ways to add your own stuff like that, whether it's maybe just an extension on top of Neuralink's platform. But I think there could be a way for Palantir, like we know they're very focused on privacy and security, to maybe get a piece of the Neuralink platform. But I think I've derailed the conversation.
Actually, I think that's interesting because I hear you on that, and I think that like for me it makes sense. Like if you're going to choose a company that is going to take care of your interface, then you want the company that their sole purpose is to create the best interface between human and artificial intelligence. You want a company that can prove to be the securest, the most secure company out there when it comes to the information and data that they gather and so on. Which all of this is to your point, things that Palantir has an advantage in. So that makes sense to me. And yeah, absolutely. I think that can definitely happen. And I think you are right that like Neuralink right now is more focused on developing the hardware, and they will have to have like a third party interface. And to me, it would make the most sense, especially if I'm saying like this is something that Palantir can provide, or what the direction that I think Palantir would eventually go to if they decide to provide consumer products. It makes sense that Palantir, like that totally makes sense. It's my point. Like I think that you are right that Palantir can do this. The biggest hurdle that I see that they would have to jump is the fact that they're working with the government, and just people having an issue with like, wait, I'm going to implant a chip on my brain that is being controlled or that is being monitored. The interface in that chip is with a company that works so closely with the government. So that from that standpoint, I see that being a huge hurdle that Palantir would have to jump, and they would have to, create a lot better like consumer relations and disclosures and things like that. So
yeah, very good point.
Like the last thing you want to do is like, wait, so I'm going to implant this chip. As it is, people are like, I don't want to implant my chip. I don't want to implant a chip where so now like it's just not good PR for Neuralink to be like, hey, we partnered with Palantir. They work very closely with the government, and we're going to put this thing in your brain. It just, so those are the hurdles that I see Palantir has to, like, those are the downsides that I see for Palantir. So it's their government work, as good as it can be for them, it's also going to create a barrier for many different types of customers, and that's going to be a problem unless they can somehow overcome that conversation and take that conversation to another place. And that's where I think Alex Karp's involvement in Palantir becomes really important, because Alex Karp addresses what Palantir's mission is from a very like philosophical perspective, and he's trying to change the narrative of what tech companies should be and how tech companies should be trusted. Because his whole narrative is like, yeah, we trust Google with everything right now, you know, like, and we put their devices and on our homes and their software and our computers, and they're constantly tracking us and tracking our data and selling our data. Like, that's not what these companies should be able to do, and we're introducing a different type of consumer product here that's safer and all of that. So they can actually move the needle towards that direction and move the conversation towards that direction and prove that they are bringing software and technology in a moral way to consumers and businesses and so on, then we could see like their potential growth like really expand. Especially right now that a lot of people are having a lot of, like, we're asking a lot of ethical questions and moral questions in regards to how technology is being used and how data is being collected with Google, with Twitter, with Facebook. So there are a lot of these issues that are being addressed in the government and addressed, you know, in our society right now. And it seems to me that this is why I'm really attracted to this company. It seems to me that Alex Karp is the guy that's really pushing this dialogue in a different direction, something that we really haven't heard any CEO talk about. You know, what are the moral values of technology and society? Like what should be like what should be like the code written for implementation of technology in societies. So that's something that he's talking about. So I think Palantir has a lot of work to do, be able to change the conversation and then prove themselves to be safer and secure. I personally believe that they are, from everything that they say, and I do believe that they have the right intention to bring technology in a safe way to companies and to consumers. But, you know, I think we're so used to having technology delivered a certain way. Yeah, so...
Yeah, all very good points. And I wasn't even thinking, obviously, this whole discussion about Neuralink and and Palantir putting out consumer products on the Neuralink platform is probably not something that either of these businesses are thinking about. But it is interesting that Palantir being on, or Palantir and Neuralink working together, that wouldn't necessarily be a selling point because, or consumers using Palantir's, whatever it ends up being, would not necessarily be a selling point because of Palantir's work with the government. I mean, it might be for some people, but I think it is a little different than the government. Let's say if the government had replaced Palantir with its own whatever platforms, software platforms, and they were the ones making an application for Neuralink, I think that would be a different discussion. I think Palantir, obviously, they've got more of a culture around what you were saying, like changing the industry dialogue, and Karp with his philosophy background talking about like moral values and ethics and that sort of thing, taking a stand socially, and I think it's going to be up to them to prove they have the right intentions and show what they stand for, whether that's to be able to be on the Neuralink platform eventually or any sort of consumer product, because I think there is a lot of skepticism usually whenever the government's involved with something. It's like, well, what could go wrong here? So, yeah. And also, I did want to follow up the Palantir's application on the Chrome store. I was wrong. It is offered by Palantir. I must have been looking at the wrong thing. And here's an interesting data point. It says there are 3,000 users of this fish catch, however you say it. So that is not a small number. 3,000. That's pretty impressive. I know probably a lot of the Palantir retail shareholders went to test it out, but yeah, I know they're like 27,000 on the PLTR subreddit, so that's probably about 11% or so, but definitely impressive regardless. Shows that there are some people on the lookout for what Palantir could be putting out there. So yeah, I think that's interesting. I think this whole discussion around Neuralink is fascinating. Not something we're going to see the light of day for 10 or 15 years, but Palantir is going to be pushing for that amount of time. So yeah.
Yeah, man. Even Neuralink is going to have quite some challenges, even getting to market. So that's why I think like Elon Musk is being really strategic about how they go to market, and that's where like they're trying to really highlight that they can solve issues like Parkinson's, like paralysis, and things like that. But that's not really Elon Musk. That's not really his intention with Neuralink. Like, these are just some things that it can do in addition to what his ultimate goal is, which is giving humans a competitive advantage.
Yeah, yeah. If I may just interject, I think, yeah, that's probably his end vision, and he'd love to do that. But even just something that I heard him say once really struck me. It's that Tesla, and this is not focused on Palantir, but Tesla, they started with autopilot on the highway first and not city streets first or whatever. This was before the whole FSD beta got going. It may have been him talking about it a year ago. But anyway, he said they started with full self-driving and autopilot on the highway first because that's where the most accidents happen and that's the highest death rate, which that really got me thinking. It's like I would have thought the reason they would start on the highway is because it's the easiest problem to solve. Cars are just going straight. Maybe you're changing lanes every once in a while, but you're just cruise control and you're just following the lanes. Obviously, there's a lot more complexity with city streets driving, but that was the reason he answered the interviewer's question about why they chose to start on highways. So maybe I think that kind of just goes back to why Elon wants to solve as many diseases or problems with human whatever they can do with Neuralink. Is because that's what he sees. He's trying to create the most good for humanity. So I think that probably is his number one intention initially. I don't think he's faking it. That could be their go to market initially, as you've been saying, but I wouldn't question his intentions with that being a real focus. I don't think he's trying to put a veil up between that and just getting to his end vision of humanity symbiosis and conquering AI. But I did want to bring that up because I'm not sure if you've thought about that or anyone that listens to this later.
It's not that I think that he's putting up front. I think it's one of the potential things that he can solve. But I think that, kind of like you said with the highway, I think that what he sees as the greatest threat for humanity is humanity being absolutely replaced by artificial intelligence, robotics, machine learning, and so on. Because, what kind of dystopian future are we looking at if there's no jobs for humans? What would we turn into? There's this candidate, Andrew Yang. I don't know if you ever heard of him, but I read his book. It's called, I'm forgetting what the name of the book is actually, but he kind of talks about how rapidly we are developing artificial intelligence and automations, so on, and he gives some graphs of how we would be displaced, and then he gives some potential scenarios of what would happen to millions of truck drivers not having a job, and what would happen to diners, and what would happen to all the front desk workers that can be replaced, and fast food restaurant workers that can be replaced. What would happen to humanity if we don't have a job? So he pushes for this idea of universal basic income, because more and more as humans get replaced, there's going to be less jobs out there, and how do we meet our basic needs and so on. And Elon Musk was one of the supporters of this candidate, Andrew Yang, because Elon Musk kind of aligns with that vision. He sees the greatest existential threat for humans is artificial intelligence. Is the fact that we can companies are working really fast to create artificial intelligence or robotics that can and automate the jobs that can completely replace human beings. And then what happens then? What happens when we have nothing to do and we have no money to our name? And that's kind of the issue that I think that he sees as the greatest threat to human beings, more than Parkinson's and so on.
Yeah.
So AI, so his Neuralink can give humans that kind of competitive advantage that will allow humans to continue to innovate and create jobs or create different means of wealth and so on. I don't have like all the statistics or all the inner thinkings of Elon Musk, obviously, but I know that prior to him disclosing what Neuralink can do, prior to him even working on Neuralink, this was what he was talking about. The reason why he would want to work on a company like that. I did want to kind of go over the profitability expectations, stock-based expectations, and the timeline. When you think all these things could happen with you, see if you had any thoughts on those for Palantir.
Sure, yeah. I didn't have anything in particular, but I think this stock-based compensation, I saw the article that you linked to, and we talked about it last time, the one on what's called the Seeking Alpha. Yeah, I think, yeah, it was good to see. Was that, and I was a little confused. Was that the guy from writing the Seeking Alpha article reaching out to Palantir and getting information back, or was that historical data that he had?
No, that's correct. So he reached out to Palantir and he got like an initial response after Q1. And I think you did the same, right? Like one of your questions was answered after Q1. Is that correct?
Yeah. So,
so
his was through. Okay. Yeah. So the way you do that is they'll put out. Well, we actually don't know when the earnings call is going to be, but it'll be sometime in May, maybe second or third week. I don't think we know at this point. But anyway, it's Say Technologies is the platform that they use. Tesla, I think, was the first company to do it. Palantir did it last time. So yeah, I'll send you the link. You'll probably see it. But anyway, yeah, you put in your question, and the top voted questions get answered by on the call by the management team. So yeah, I don't know if was one of his was that how he got the question answered, or did I don't know. Anyway, regardless.
Yeah, that's correct. That's how he got the question answered.
Okay.
I don't know. He followed up with management. I don't know. He doesn't say whether it was through. What did you say it's called? Say.
Yeah. It's.
Yeah. So he didn't disclose that, but he reached out to them, got an email back or some kind of message back, and then he followed up with another question, and then that's when he gets the second response. And with that second response, that's how he ends up breaking down the stock-based compensation.
Okay. Yeah, so I think that's very encouraging, especially if that's up-to-date information, if that's coming right from Palantir. I think basically the way I was thinking about it is that what I wasn't really factoring in is that Q3 and 4 really were the first time they got hit with these stock-based compensation, the big headwinds, because of the direct listing and how the accounting works for that. So based on the information he was able to get and what you showed in your video, I think the more that kind of dwindles down and returns to a normal level and an acceptable level, I think that could kind of turn the profitability definitely in the right direction. I don't know how soon it's going to happen. You said that potentially it could be as soon as maybe this quarter. I think the good thing about Palantir is it's not really like seasonality. There isn't really like a seasonality, anything to worry about there, because I think the contracts are pretty far extended and we know what to expect because they get signed many years out. So I don't think it's like a seasonality question for Q1. So I'm just expecting them to increase revenue just pretty much every quarter from here on out. They guided for 45%, I think, in Q1 or something like that. I don't know in particular, but I was just wondering, do you agree that stock-based compensation will really drop off that much? I think it maybe will be a few more quarters before it gets down to a level where profitability really becomes a possibility. But I think we'd probably hear from Palantir maybe on the conference call, maybe on this one coming up, that could be a reality going forward. But yeah, I just wanted to hear more your thoughts on it. I haven't really looked at the specifics yet, but I think there will definitely be a lot to break down once we get the numbers for this quarter coming out of these quarters that were hit with the direct listing, which is a little it's like more of a unique situation. Not that many companies choose to direct list, and Palantir had their reasons for doing it, but Yeah, so like what are you thinking, and are you expecting profitability for Q1 2021?
For 2021, yes. I don't know that. I'm not sure that Q1. So if so the way that he broke it down, and I looked back at his math, and his math was actually incorrect. So he had them like, so he has like 1.1 billion split through 8.06 years, and then he had, I think, like 857 million split by 3.2 years. And then when he divided all of that, he came up with a number of, I want to say it was like 75 million or something like that. And but that 875 million was actually more than what he suggested it was going to be quarter over quarter, because he suggested like 144. And someone in my comment section actually pointed this out. So I went back to do the math, and yeah, so we're looking at a minimum, if you split the stock-based compensation as he did, which he's just averaging it out through the 8 years, the 1.1 through the 8 years, if they exercise those options, and then the 857 million through the 3.2 years. This is all part of the I guess 10K is what it's called.
Yeah, 10K is the annual report, but I don't know if it's going to be, I don't know if it's going to be like that smooth where it's just averaged same thing every quarter.
So,
I think
so it won't be. It won't be. I think that's fair to assume that it won't be. But what he does is like he averages out, and then he expects it to be higher the initial quarters. So he adds another 20 million on top of that average. So he and from 75 million, he says for Q1 I'm expecting an additional 25 million. So I'm going to say 100 million for Q1. That's what he says. But after correcting his math and seeing that it was wrong, then we're expecting, if we want to add another 25 million on top of that, 102 million, then we're looking at 127 million. My point is, I don't think Q1 is going to be profitable, but I think we're going to get really close. We're going to be anywhere between like a negative zero point 0.01 EPS to a positive zero point 0.01 EPS, something like that. I do think they will decrease, because in that article, like in Palantir's response, they addressed dilution. They said that, we understand that we're diluting and we're trying to manage that. So they address all like those important factors. Like we understand that by stock-based compensation, we're diluting and we're working towards managing that. They also address that the reason why stock-based compensation is high right now is because they just public listed, and this is the first time like their employees get liquidity, so it's high, and they're working to address that as well. So they acknowledged that, and then they gave somewhat quote unquote guidance by pointing out the 10K where he was able to do the math. And I do expect, because I have like this for Q1, I have like a 49% growth year over year. So I have them at about a little over $357 million for Q1. And if, let's say, stock-based compensation is at 125, which I think it's a possibility. I mean, they went from like, what was it, 830 million to 241 million. So I think it's a possibility for them to go from 241 to like 125, which is like about a 50%, less than 50% decrease. And, going from 800 to 241 was, more than 50%. So I think that's a possibility. But again, this is all speculation. We're just going to have to wait and see. But I do see them by the end of Q1, since their revenues are going to continue growing, but by the end of 2021, I should say. So by Q4, like for sure, I see them hitting profitability. Like, I don't think that even if they're really looking to manage dilution, I don't think that they're going to keep, having these huge numbers on stock-based compensation where it's going to be, over 200 million every quarter. Like that would really be deflating for a lot of investors. So I think they're aware of that as well. I mean, they acknowledged it on that email. So
yeah.
So I do expect them to be profitable this year. Maybe not as soon as Q1, but pretty darn close in Q1 if stock-based compensation is about 125.
That's encouraging. I mean, yeah, I found the link and I'm looking at it now. They say they're focused on managing dilution, which is actually good to hear, because that's what stock-based compensation does in a negative way. And a key, I think it says dilution will be small on an annual basis. So that is encouraging, and it is going to be a key component of their compensation, because I think they choose to use that instead of maybe higher salaries, which obviously there are trade-offs to that. But I would expect I'm looking at it now. It says the vesting is gonna, just because they went public, the vesting has to go through like this process where it's gonna. I think it will phase down over time, as kind of what you were saying. But yeah, maybe we'll see a profitable quarter this year, maybe Q3 or 4, unless there's something that we're not expecting to happen. But that's what's kind of exciting about Palantir. And I'll have to jump off soon, but this was great. But final note, Palantir is just like gonna turn into such a revenue generation machine, and they're gonna be so profitable in the future. They're like, you just think about what each incremental contract it does to the company. Like, they've put in the work, they've built the platforms, they've made the software. Now it's about, in the next 5 years, I think it's about getting it out there and continuing to build the whatever software, developing it. They had their Foundry and Gotham 21 launches, which looked very exciting. But yeah, I think they're kind of at a turning point here, which is why I think they chose to go public last year. I don't think it was for no reason. I think they're at a turning point, and I think the financials will come shortly. Yeah, and just to kind of close on the Neuralink and the Palantir, we were talking about that for a little while. Yeah, I think there is definitely a lot of the culture that aligns between those two. So,
Absolutely.
especially like the human and AI symbiosis, I think that could be a reason maybe they work together in the future. But I do think having definitely that culture aligning is a positive sign, whether it's because, well, we've got the Peter Thiel and Elon Musk link there. Whether that played into anything for Palantir, I don't know, but yeah, it's something to think about. And yeah, thanks for this discussion, Jay. This was great.
Yeah, and one more thing, man. Even the SpaceX working with NASA and all of that. So
Yeah.
Elon Musk is not opposed to working with the government, and that's a lot of government work right there.
Right.
So there are connections there, man, and I do see it, and we'll see. But I think that's far ahead of the future. I'm going to leave you with this, and we'll pick this up on our next conversation if we do another one sometime soon. But one thing I've really been thinking of is like the Lilium and the Sarcos partnership. And somebody asked, like, what do you think about those? And I'm like, well, I think that Palantir is investing now because they see like in 5 years, those are going to be the hardware that their software is going to power for like the business industry and all of that. But we'll talk a little bit about that next time around, man. I know you got to go.
Yeah, great place to pick up. Thank you, Jay.
All right, man. I really enjoyed the conversation. Take it easy.
Bye.